I'm all about finding the little joys in your everyday, whether it's the cup of tea, whether it's the walk, whether it's pets, whether it's seeing flowers. At the moment, there's loads of bluebells out, just little things, and being with that to help move forward. And then, because we all know that grief isn't linear, so there will be triggers, there'll be times where you're brought back to it. And I think this past year, although it's brought us together as communities in groups, I really feel that it has. There have also been a lot of triggers with everything, haven't there, with lockdown and coronavirus. So it has, there'll always be those things coming up. And I think it's so important that we learn where we can find strength and learn things to help ourselves.
Welcome to the Full Stop Podcast with your hosts, Sarah Lawrence from After the Storm, Berenice Smith from Walking Our Shoes, and me, Michael Hughes from Married and Childless. Now, if this is your first time here, our podcast is centred around supporting the childless not by choice community, and our aim is to be a focal point for the community, and with all our special guests, show you how to manage your grief and give a voice to the issues specific to us. And by example, show that a full and happy life can be had without those children we dearly wanted. Now, this episode, we explore how to find the joy in the everyday with Clare, Elleray and Bindi Shah. Now, we'll let them introduce themselves and what they get up to. Now, please be aware there are potential triggers in this episode, and there is a brief discussion on suicide. Proceed with caution and seek help if you need to. So let's hear from Clare and Bindi.
What we'd like to ask is if you'd like to just introduce yourselves to the listeners and just say who you are, what you're doing, and then we'll kind of take it all from there.
Lovely. Bindi, would you like to start?
Okay. So, hey everyone, I'm Bindi Shah and I do meditation classes. I've been teaching meditation now for a long while. I started off by going to India to learn and with yoga. So I was doing yoga and meditation to start with, and now meditation classes. And recently I have started meditation classes specifically for childless not by choice.
Thank you, Bindi. That is really lovely. Thank you. Clare, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Lovely, yeah. So my name's Clare Elleray, and I run a little organisation, a little singing organisation called Growing Singing. And again, like Bindi, I have recently started a group specifically for childless not by choice women. And that really came out of the pandemic, weirdly, as so much has, because I've been running singing groups. I'm more or less evangelical about singing and about how good it is for us to sing. It's not the solution to all your problems, unfortunately, but it can be for those people who like singing, even if they don't think they can. It's so important to sing. It's so releasing to sing. It can bring you joy and connection in a way that few other things can. So I've been evangelical about singing for a long time, maybe 25 years I have been running groups, but obviously I've been running them face to face. And in the pandemic, I was forced to go online, like most of us, and I loathed it. Absolutely loathed it, and I would cry at the end of every Zoom session, and I thought actually I'm not going to be able to do this. This is not for me. And I thought, fair enough, that's okay, you don't have to. But then I got all these messages back from people in my Kendall groups and my local groups saying, oh, it's so good to sing, it's still good to sing, it's not the same but it's good, blah blah blah. And I thought, oh, this is my job. This is still my job. And it is still offering joy and connection and a good singing experience in the midst of all this. And that made me think, oh, could you do that with childless not by choice women? Could you have that experience with a worldwide audience who don't have to be in Kendal? And so I did an experiment. I launched in World Childless Week in 2020 and just did a free experiment to see can it work. And I had about 40-50 people who were interested and about 30 people, 25 perhaps, who actually turned up. And I was blown away by the fact that people they did experience that joy, that connection. They loved learning some new songs. And I just thought, oh, I've discovered something I want to do now. And it gave me this huge lift in the midst of the pandemic to do that. So I've continued, and I call it Growing Singing, Childless and Whole. And it is, I want to say, unfortunately, just for women, because that sort of feels like my expertise. I don't know where it's going, but for the moment it exists, and people can join us for free just to try it out, like come and see if you like it. And I don't know where it's going. We may do some recording. We may do one of those, recordings, virtual choir recordings, or maybe we won't. We don't really talk about our childlessness while on the call, though it comes up because that's one of our connections. But the real connection is about singing, that we all want to sing and learn songs together. And so that's how it started. And that has been surprisingly and kind of magically powerful for me. It feels very much my thing, because obviously I too am childless not by choice. And that, it's like, oh, this brings together all sorts of me. So yeah, that's where I am. The very beginning of something experimental, but rather lovely.
How amazing is that? How exciting to be talking to you at the beginning of something amazing and experimental. I can hear the enthusiasm in your voice. It's incredible. And the emotion that is obviously bringing as well, and the comfort too. And it's so lovely, I think, isn't it, to have something that's ours. And so many things, I think, in our community can be taken, or you go to something and it can be triggering. We've all been to those situations where we've been into a class, and Bindi, I would say the same with you. Certainly I go to meditation classes and to yoga, and you're kind of thinking, oh, okay, am I going to be okay here? Because it's meant to be relaxing. This is meant to be relaxing, but there's this kind of bit on the edge of me that's going, if they say the word your children, I'm going to just go completely nuts here. And that's not the purpose of me being here, but I don't really want this to be a triggering space. So I think that's quite a nice thing to create, isn't it? To give something back that's ours.
Yeah, definitely. And that whole, especially when with meditation and you go inwards, and it's very, you're opening yourself up. You're really opening up your heart. You're opening yourself up to receive. And it's creating a safe space where you don't have to then worry about what's going to happen with the teacher. Is she suddenly going to, get pregnant? There's none of that worry going on. And also, the people popping up behind the teacher in the space, the photographs behind. I mean, yes, as Claire said, everything's online now, and we've all seen interviews with people and they've got all their photographs behind them, and it's all about, their lives, all about their children, a lot of it. So all of that within, I really wanted to create a safe space that we don't have to worry about that. So we can feel comfortable going within, we can feel comfortable with the healing and the healing journey that we're all coming about. And funnily enough, I also started during World Childless Week with Stephanie. So that was like amazing as well. And having those groups and realizing that yes, there is oh, I don't know what to say. There's like, value in that, in pinpointing, rather than having necessarily like it's a broad meditation class, because I do broader meditation classes, but that value of having a group which is specifically for us and our story, and where people can understand us, and we don't have to explain everything. We don't need to go into the class and explain, and all of our journeys to here are different, but what connects us is that understanding. We can understand everyone's journey, whatever our journey has been to this, because there's so many different parts. And even my own journey, it's been there's been health aspects. So I've had adenomyosis, which involves a lot of continuous, very heavy bleeding, and lockdown as well. So it's quite ironic that we went into the lockdown and I already knew how that felt, being, not being able to do everything that you want to do, or not being able to go outside, or be restricted during certain, weeks and months of the year. And so yes, so most of my journey is with health, but there's other aspects as well. We tried adoption, so there's all that thing of, oh, why don't you just try? And that's like, well, what do you say to that when you have tried? It's like so difficult. So there's lots of different aspects to people's journeys, but what this does is it brings everyone together with the understanding. So I think that's really special as well.
So, Bindi, you're like the real McCoy because you've been to the spiritual home of yoga and meditation.
I have. I have.
Wow.
I learned. Yeah, I spent a year, 2002. So I used to be in a corporate job in Frankfurt, actually. I used to live and work in Frankfurt for a few years. And it was very, very busy, very corporate telecommunications. So I took myself out to India to study Ayurveda and yoga and meditation. And yes, you can imagine what a huge learning curve that is, going to an Eastern, country to live for however long, from Western. So, but yeah, and I learned really, really, really special learning there, because it's all guru student. So they call it guru shishya. The shishya is the student. So you're learning, you're absorbing, you're just open and absorbing all of that learning in. You learn Sanskrit. You just, you learn about the herbs out there, and it's just, you absorb everything. It's very different from classroom learning. Yeah, so very practical, very much in there, and yeah, beautiful.
So, whereabouts in India was this? Sorry, I love the detail.
Yeah, of course. It was Coimbatore, which is Tamil Nadu, which is on the border with Kerala. So Ayurveda, basically Ayurveda's home, we can say, is Kerala. And it's south, so South India. And it's kind of the part I always feel that kept most of it, because it was the part which was less colonized by all the different, so first of all the Mughal Empire and the British Empire and all of that kind of colonization, and the south of India has really kept its heart, I always feel, more so than North India. So they really kept their culture there with the Ayurveda, the natural healing. So Ayurveda, for listeners, is the ancient healing art of India. So it's like all natural medicine, and that relates then with yoga, because yoga is the physical, let's say physical medicine, physical natural medicine. So all links in, and then the meditation is the emotional aspect, the spiritual aspect. So yes, I spent a year there, which was so interesting and just amazing to do. And at the time I decided, because I didn't have, I didn't have a partner, wasn't married, didn't have, have a boyfriend or anything. And I was like, right, let's go. I actually got made redundant in Frankfurt. And I was like, right, what am I going to do? So I took myself off to India for a year to learn.
Wow. That must have been such an experience.
Yeah, it was.
Did it take long to get sort of acclimatized in terms of just culturally and I guess, physically while you were there?
Yes, definitely. About 3 or 4 months to really understand the culture and to be comfortable with it as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
it takes a while. So when you're on holiday, it's different, isn't it? You're on holiday, you're just enjoying, you're in that kind of moment of enjoyment. And then when you're living, studying, shopping, cooking, all of those things that you do for yourself, even though, I was in a school environment, so there were other students there and things, but there's still a lot that you do for yourself. And the heat, just things like that, the heat and all of that, getting comfortable with, doing yoga and exercise in that heat as well, and learning.
Oh, that is beautiful, Bindi. That is really lovely to hear it. And I love that's another connection. Bindi and I have been noticing connections between us, and the connection is that I too lived abroad. It wasn't in India. I wish, maybe another time. But I lived in Italy for years, between the ages of 25 and 30, that kind of age. I'm now 57. So it was a long time ago now, but I really get what you mean about living somewhere else. It's different to visiting somewhere else. You develop a kind of connection with that place that is wholly different than just visiting. It's just a different experience, isn't it? It's a different travel experience, and because you're not traveling, you're living there and you're being there, and for me it was in Italy. I assumed, of course, at 25 that I was going to go out to Italy, and there I would meet, and then I would be married, and then I would have children, and it hadn't occurred to me. It didn't occur to me for a second that I wouldn't have children, and it was the living in Italy that made me realise after 5 years that I really needed to be back in the UK, because for better or worse, and in many ways it's worse, the UK is my home. That's where I really belong, and so coming home was necessary too. But I came home then 5 years later, having lived in Italy, having assumed that maybe I would meet somebody and family would ensue, and it hadn't. And it was at that point, at 30 years old, that I began to experience periods of depression, periods of anxiety, which now I look back and I realise that was the beginnings of grief. That was the beginnings of something. Now, I had no idea about that at the time. I was only 30, so there was no need to worry. But I began to experience periods of anxiety and depression, which, through having some help, I recovered from. But I didn't. It wasn't until I was 53 that I realised I still needed help, and I still, with my childlessness, I mean, but by then my childlessness was very real. There was no question that I wasn't going to be childless by then. And I now look back at that period and think I learned something about grief. I have now learned something about grief, and I can look back and think, oh, that was why. Partly. Our lives are so complicated, aren't they? Mental health is so complicated, but I now realise that I was beginning to experience the grief of childlessness at 30 years old, and I'm really curious about how many people for whom that is true, that they start to get an inkling that maybe it isn't going to happen for them. And I love the idea that what we're doing by podcasts like these, by building a community of people who are childless not by choice, is we're allowing in that narrative, that, yeah, some people are not going to be parents, and that's okay. Look at us. We're okay. I don't know if that makes sense. I've kind of rambled into a...
No,
Yes.
that makes total sense. And I think that's partly, I guess, why we go looking for community, isn't it? Because it's that we all know we don't have to say it, but we also don't then have to deal with, as Bindi said, all the hidden triggers that you wouldn't be aware of if you're not a member of this community. So I guess listening to you both, and it's been fascinating already. You can tell I go quiet when I'm really interested. So is Sarah there? Yes, I am. But I guess what I hear is one of you is you're encouraging us to use our voices to be heard, and then I hear Bindi encouraging us to go inward in like self-discovery. So it's kind of almost, I was sitting here earlier thinking, how are these two connected other than community? But actually listening to you talk and your passions, you're kind of taking our community on different journeys, aren't you? Use your voice, have a look inside and see what's going on, and get comfortable. And that really fascinates me, especially when it comes to the mental health side of things.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, in terms of using your voice, I came across, in the midst of the experiment, to see whether this singing group could work, a woman who I know locally, who's in her mid-70s, she had joined us, and she had been a bit uncomfortable about childless not by choice. She said, well, I am childless not by choice, but I'm not sure about this. Anyway, and she started to speak about a book that she had come across, and it is called Every Child a Song. And I thought, oh no, she's going to start speaking about a children's book. This is going to be triggered. Well, no. Every Child a Song is a book about it's the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So it's explaining that convention for children. And it's it starts off, I'm going to read a bit. When you were born, a song began. Sometimes it didn't sound much like a song, and sometimes no one could hear it. But it was there in every heartbeat, every breath, tiny, fragile, and unique. A melody the world had never heard before. And as I heard her speaking about it, part of me was beginning to be triggered by the idea of children. And then I thought, no, me. I was a child. Each one of us was born with a unique, fragile, tiny voice, and it's allowing the childless, not by choice, human beings in the world to express themselves. That voice, our voices, are much more rarely heard than the parent voice. People who became parents have a reason for their voices. Oh yes, they've got little children. They've got children to talk about. And what we're doing so carefully and beautifully, I think, by podcasts like these, is allowing all those unique, tiny, childless voices to, we too were children. Am I making sense? It's our unique voices that have to be heard too. And so, yes, as you say, Sarah, I'm encouraging that voice use, as Bindi is encouraging looking inward somewhat, though I'm sure that they're connected, aren't they? They feed off each other, looking inward and then using your voice.
Bindi, I'm thinking throat chakra here.
Yeah.
I confess now to our listeners, well, not confess, I'm delighted to say that I actually do go to Bindi's meditation classes, and they are absolutely fantastic. I cannot begin to explain how absolutely fabulous they are and how therapeutic they are, and what a safe space that Bindi has created. But I think that just you're right in that lovely turn of phrase there in what you've said, Clare, about the breath. And for me, music has a beat, and the beat can be meditative, and the songs that you sing have a beat, so there a beat to those that's meditative, which is also perhaps very much in keeping, I think, with that meditative aspect of focusing on the breath and the movement of breath as well. I'm going to stop talking because Bindi is the expert on this. I'm just thinking about how it sort of does tie together, because it that inner peace, I think perhaps maybe getting that peace and that confidence together through meditative work and through yoga can, I think, really, really help perhaps to give that confidence back as well, that maybe people need in order then to think, okay, yeah, I can sing. It's releasing something. There's all this sort of thing, I think, at what you're doing. The common aspect to me is release. It's releasing something, finding a peace, and yeah. So Bindi, sorry, I'm going to stop talking because you both know this. I know that you do. So
yeah, no, definitely that whole release and just the different layers, I think, of healing. So yes, meditation allows you to go in. So a lot of the time, so as you know, we were talking about the whole mental health aspect and how grief may have been there for longer, or the grief for the child, let's say, the childlessness grief would have been there for longer than we realize. So by the time it actually comes up, we've already been in that grief possibly for years, at least, months at least. So we've already been in that aspect, in that part of life, but not realizing. So what meditation allows is it allows it to come through, which is very scary. It's not, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing. I think grief isn't easy. Being childless, not by choice, isn't easy. None of this is easy for us. And the healing aspects aren't easy either. And I know Sarah knows that as well with her clients. I'm sure, that whole thing, it's not easy speaking about it. It's not easy coming out with it. So it's just allowing people to know it's not easy, but also allowing it through, because once you allow it through, you can release it and you can let it go. You can have it move out of you. And that's what we need to move forward, because we're all in this life. We can't be miserable for years on end. We need to recognize our grief, of course, but we cannot be in that aspect. We have lives to live. We have to move forward. We really do. And at the start, of course, it's going to be difficult and challenging. But as we move through, as we learn different things, as we meditate, as we sing, as we create things, as we do artwork, all the different things, the writing, all the different things we do, that helps us release, that helps us come up, and that helps us move forward. And I'm all about finding the little joys in your everyday, whether it's the cup of tea, whether it's the walk, whether it's pets, whether it's seeing flowers. At the moment, there's loads of bluebells out, just little things, and being with that to help move forward. And then, because we all know that grief isn't linear, so there will be triggers, there'll be times where you're brought back to it. And I think this past year, although it's brought us together as communities in groups, I really feel that it has. There have also been a lot of triggers with everything, haven't there, with lockdown and coronavirus. So it has, there'll always be those things coming up. And I think it's so important that we learn where we can find strength and learn things to help ourselves.
Yeah, that's lovely to hear, Bindi, really. And the learning, I love the way you bring in the other things that one might do, yoga, art classes, whatever. We were saying this podcast is partly, this particular episode is about forming groups, making connections, that sort of, and it does, in a sense, it doesn't really matter what those groups are. Now, I'm running a singing group, you're running a meditation group, but that's not to say I don't think singing is the only thing. I don't think singing is the answer if you're not really into singing. Maybe a walking group, is your thing. Maybe, yeah. So not to be sort of exclusive in any sense about what it is that you do, but that the importance that if you are in this community that you didn't choose, you didn't want to be childless, but you are, then can you find, are there things out there that suit you, very specifically, uniquely you, or do you want to start something?
That's
Do you know what I mean? It's not.
Yeah, that's it. It is. It's. I think that it's actually. I think a lot of it maybe actually is about trying to work out who you were before. Maybe going a little bit backwards into ourselves, if that makes sense. Just in my experience of just stopping writing for a while. I know that we've got that in common as well, Bindi, through the conversations we've had before about writing. And I wrote in the depths of all of my childlessness. I seem to be one of those people that actually I'd be terribly good in the Victorian era. I'd be just marvelous. I'd be top selling, because the more kind of bereft I am and the more grief I have, the better I write. And if I'm actually okay, then I don't. I can't do anything. The words don't come out. So the more tragic I am, the better it is for writing anyway, which is not healthy.
Oh, Berenice, that's so. It's the same with me. It's so dark. Oh my goodness. My when I was going, so my big, well, after the adoption process, that was 2016. So my big, and then that was it. I knew, and that was like, right, that's the start of my grieving process. And during the depths of that 2017, 2018, I was waking up at 5 a.m. and writing like 3 poems by 6 a.m. or something. It was just like constant, and the flow out, which was so therapeutic. I mean, oh my goodness, I would just get it all out and then I would feel better, for a little while, and then it would come out again. But that depth, and I have, when Clare was speaking about mental health, I did find a poem. I don't know if you'd like to hear it. I did during
yes, please. Yes.
During the myths, I did actually publish, and I publish I write my poetry under a pseudonym, a pen name, Grace Sumeria, because what I found is I could express myself and I didn't have to care about Bindi Shah or who Bindi Shah knew or who would be reading Bindi Shah's things. And I could just write however I wanted to. And I found this amazing, statistic, which is very, I hope it doesn't trigger anyone. So I just want everyone to realize, who's listening, that there are places that you can receive help from. And I'm sure there will be links on the podcast as well for that. But there was a statistic which was with the Fertility Network UK in 2016, where they did a survey, and they found that 40% of women experiencing infertility had suicidal thoughts. And that just really made me think, because in the depths of my grief at that time, it was a very dark time for me, and it was a very depressive period. And then I read that that quote, or that survey, and I was like, wow, that's 40%. And if you think 40% of just the groups that we're in, or that's such a huge amount of women. And and they only say women, who knows what's happening with our partners and our husbands and our male friends. So I just quickly read this, if that's okay. So it's called 40%, the poem. 40% of women who experience fertility have suicidal thoughts. How can I be sure that I will survive given those stats? How can I build myself up, strengthen myself to live? Every day, every morning, every night so that I become someone with joy, not merely a number, so that I become a survivor, a warrior, so that I become someone with purpose and not simply existing, so that I become me again before all this. And I thought that was just with what Berenice said about bringing it all back to how we were before, or just having purpose.
That's beautiful, Bindi. That is really, really lovely. And I think it gives a depth as well, doesn't it, to the fact that they are numbers. And we've got an awful lot of narrative, I think, around that at the moment with the pandemic about, statistics, and people are numbers, not names, that have passed or have suffered from COVID. But I think also in any situation, any illness, or anywhere where there is a statistic, there is also people behind that. But we all end up being a statistic, and we're not then a number. We're not a voice, we're not a name, we're not given a name, which I think is, again, like you say, the podcast, enormously sort of proud that we exist, and there are other podcasts coming around too that also give voices as well. That's so important, and all the groups that happen too. Something popped in my head then, and I'm just trying to ravel it back in again. And what on earth was it? Oh yes, because it's interesting that the whole idea of going back to who we were beforehand, and actually it's something that comes up, isn't it, a lot in the conversations around when we're talking to other people who may be parents, or people who choose to be child free. But I think particularly with parents, is that we always sort of, there's that thing, well, they were people before they had children. What were their interests before they started just talking solely about kids? And actually, there is a correlation somewhere along the line that what we go through changes us too. And it's really hard to go back also and find out who we are as well. And there was something I was reading during the week about people going through that, fundamentally what we all go through, however we end up in this particular room together, we've still gone through something life-changing that changes us completely from who we were before. But it's very hard. I mean, my fertility story is lengthy, very, very long, and takes up most of my 30s and 40s. That's our 20 years of me trying to remember who the hell I was before. I can't actually really remember.
Or to rediscover or discover anew as well, isn't it? It's just about, there might be new things as well, and getting back, I think just getting back to that part where there was that joy, where you felt some joy because you weren't worrying about whether you were going to conceive, or I just think back to like some of the holidays I had, and where I wouldn't drink any alcohol because I was like, oh, could be pregnant, you know what I mean? And it's all those, and I think just going back to a time where maybe there's more carefree and joy, rather than always having to think about things, like difficult things.
I think we touched on this in the birthday episode, actually. So if you haven't listened to it, but I guess what we were saying is we were talking around about this, how childlessness fundamentally changes you. So you'll be version 1, you'll go through this, and then you'll be version 2, 3, 4, whatever. But I guess from our perspective, what you said there is trying to find the joy again is really tricky, actually, because if your whole life has been, or your 20s and your 30s has been, this is what I want, and I'm going to do anything I can to get it, trying then to find a little bit of joy can be really tricky. So it's like, okay, I was spat out the back of my journey, and I was like, well, I don't even really know who I am. If you'd asked me, what do you enjoy doing? Nothing. I had no insight in who I actually was. So I think where you talked about going and finding the little things, or singing or meditation or going to walk out in nature, actually that can be a very small step into thinking, well, who the bloody hell am I now? What do I represent? What is my purpose? And I think the problem is sometimes we often go purpose when we actually need to take about 10 steps back and go, actually, who am I? What do I enjoy? So I hear you sort of saying going back to you, but I guess it's kind of, perhaps it is going full circle, but you are going to be a completely different person, I think. That's the very real thing, isn't it?
But that goes back to what Claire said about that voice, doesn't it? Finding your voice, your song. It's almost like a full circle, isn't it? You're going back and going, okay, what was I when I had a fragile voice? Mm-hmm. Almost. Gosh, there's so much to sort of unravel here. It's all like a little sort of, almost like poetry, isn't it? But it is just reversing back. But that's really, really hard to do when it's been such a long part and such a big part of one's life.
And also there's all that side of it, and there's the side of identity, isn't there? That like myself, I come from a big family. My mum was devoutly Catholic, is devoutly Catholic. My father was utterly atheist. They agreed to have as many children as came along, and 7 children came along. So I'm one of 7, and everybody, I didn't know that people had fewer than 4 children, because everybody in my world when I was young had at least 4. So when somebody in some childhood situation said to me, "Oh, Catholic," I thought, how did he know? How did he know that I was Catholic? I don't really understand, because I didn't know that there was anything about contraception in the Catholic Church. That was just, my whole world was Catholic, and everybody was. So it never occurred to me that I wouldn't have children, and it actually, weirdly, naively, never occurred to me that I wouldn't have children until I was 40. And I swear that is true. That was not one of the potential things about me. Not having children wasn't going to be possible. I was going to have children. So when I became pregnant at 19, completely and utterly by accident, the first sexual experiences I was having, I was shocked, and I was slightly horrified, but I wasn't horrified. No, because I was going to have a baby. Oh my God, I was just going to start early. And my family all went into kind of, oh, well, these things happen. You're going to... So there was this incredibly intense joy that I was going to have a baby. Oh my God, we were so excited. As well as a little bit like, oh, you better stop college for a bit. You better intercalate. And I can summon up the excitement of that. Now, I won't, because it's quite triggering. But I obviously didn't have the baby. I miscarried. The pain of that was huge and massive, and that was not something that my family or the people around me dealt with. It was like, oh well, right, now we'll all move on, shall we? That didn't happen. Now, Claire, go back to college. And I just cried. I wrote a song about it 7 years later. That is that. It's that feeling of 7 years along my road, and I can't forget your name. Of course, this baby had a name, and so on. And the next time I became kind of really, really desperate about pregnancy was when I was 40. So in the intervening years, all I did was wait for it to happen. I was single all that time, more or less. So of course it wasn't going to happen. Motherhood wasn't going to come across me being single. And I was very frightened of repeating a devastatingly traumatic experience again, so I wasn't going to get pregnant by mistake again. So it wasn't until I was 40 that I suddenly thought, oh my God, I need to get pregnant. And I approached friends who are gay, and they were so excited by the possibility that we were going to have a child. And and again, I can summon up the excitement of that period of my life. There were 18 months, 2 years. That's all we did. We tried to have children. We tried to have a child together. And I was so excited. I was so thrilled. I knew it was going to happen. Again, it just never even occurred to me that it might not. So my story then includes eventually IVF, eventually attempting to come to terms with the fact that it wasn't going to happen. I was by then 42, 43. Stop it. You can't maintain a relationship with 3 of you when you're not going to have children. And they since have gone on to adopt as a couple. And I do get a huge lift when I think of those boys. They adopted 2 boys who are full siblings. And I think, oh, if we had a child as a threesome, those 2 boys who are getting bigger all the time would not have those incredible parents they have. And wow, but how painful is that? I don't have children. My identity has utterly changed by that experience. Nobody can tell me that isn't as huge an identity change as parenting would have been, whether it happened at 19 or 40. You can't deny the hugeness of the identity change, can you? That happens in you when you do not become the parent that you planned to become. It beggars belief sometimes that people's denial of that. People's, oh, you didn't have kids. Oh, you can have one of mine.
It's that dismissiveness, isn't it? I think it's very hard to get that, and it's something Jodie talks about often, Jodie Day, about disenfranchised grief. In fact, I did a talk on Thursday to a gender balance network, and happened to drop into the conversation that when people are working from home, they might be working in the room that was meant to be their child's bedroom. And it's a mixed demographic, sort of parents in there, and there was a collective kind of, like that. And it was true. It's absolutely true. It's the room I'm sitting in right now, and it's become a positive space because, of course, the podcast is recorded from here, which is also really lovely, and it changes the space. But actually, it's so disenfranchising, so awful to sort of say, okay, all these things mean very little, or that if you try to talk about them, then you're actually closed down for that too, when actually they are life-changing, just as much as being a parent as your friends are to being adoptive parents, and the process and the journey that they went through in order to have their 2 sons. But it's a different path, isn't it? It's a very different route to take. The adoption route is very different to the other routes that we may change. They're all very different paths, yet are all kind of lumped in, I think, together by people from the outside, because there's a very much a lack of understanding, because we don't get the space to talk about what it is we're doing, and therefore nobody learns from anybody, and we end up with a them and an us situation. So we have to find these safe spaces where we can sing and we can meditate and we can walk in places with others who, as Sarah said, we know that that's what we've got in common, but it's not the thing that we necessarily always talk about. 3 weeks ago, I think it was, I did a meditation. I do something, it's something called about archetypes, and I did that 3 weeks ago, and it was all about innocence. And as you said, Bindi, you go into quite a deep place when you're meditating, and you have this infinite trust with the teacher that they can support you. And they talked about going through, the meditation was going through a journey. You choose a place and a safe space, and the idea is you're going on this journey, and you're walking through this environment to this place that is safe for you. And in this place, and I chose my house because I thought, well, that's where I felt safest during the whole kind of lockdown. It's my home. And it was very pleasant. I thought, oh, that's lovely, because, I've often felt about leaving this house because of the memories that it contains. But actually, I thought about that. So I thought, oh, yeah, my house, that'd be fantastic. So I'm sitting there meditating and thinking at my house and about the door. And I'm like, yeah, I know my door. Well, I love my front door. Actually, it's new and I love it. And, this is all really lovely. And that's my hall. And I've decorated my hall lately. And I love my walls. And in this room, there is a child in a cradle, says the teacher. And I thought, no, leave, gone, straight out, literally within seconds I had left the space. And it was really difficult because I thought, well, there's obviously, I know what other people's situations are, but given there's about 30 people on this, and statistically 1 in 5, we're 1 in 5, and there's got to be somebody else there, and I don't know how they're feeling about that. And the person that's behind all of this is actually a friend of mine, and we had a lovely conversation about it, and I did explain to him that this is the thing, and they had tried to sort of say that there might be something triggering because it is about innocence and about back to children, but for whatever reason I missed that thing, that warning. It just wasn't there for me. I don't know whether it's complacency or just I wasn't. I think I was paying attention. I'm sure I was. But, you know, it then became quite a big trigger. And luckily, I knew that later on that day, I was going to Bindi's class, and that actually I could do another meditation almost to replace that experience, and was able to find a safe space and get my kind of ball of light going. And that was really helpful. I felt like I had a little bit more strength back from that. But it does concern me that, you know, there is that trust that we place in other people, and however much we can explain what we've been through, sometimes that message doesn't always sink in as much as it should do, which is why these communities and safe spaces are so important.
And I think that is the thing of having a group that understands you, and where you can find empathy, understanding. And one of the things that I really realized at the start of, you know, of this year that we've had, this lockdown and pandemic year, that at the start it seemed as though people were having a lot of empathy with different things. So with, say, with chronic illness, when people have to be inside and they can't go out, and then people were understanding, oh wow, that's really difficult because everyone was restricted and everyone had to stay inside. And then as the months went on, it just seemed as though that empathy and understanding just went away, and we're back to, I don't know, you know, how it kind of was when people weren't understanding. So in a way, these groups are so important, because then you are in community with people who do get you. And however much we would love and really wish it to be wider, and, you know, to be understood by family members, by the wider community, it's really, really difficult. And I think, yes, of course, there are friends, you know, people who get us and people who do come into our community, and mothers and parents and everything. But, you know, it's there's more likely that people don't. And I think that's why it's really important to have groups where you can feel safe. And what I've also been thinking is that you can feel seen, because if you do say you're childless not by choice, do people really know all of the different layers and, you know, the lives that we've led since we were maybe mid-20s or early 20s all along? And it's just that kind of, you can be seen and you can be heard. People will get you, and you don't have to explain loads and loads. And I'll equate it, just because we had you know, we had the Black Lives podcast, I just equate it to that. And I feel it's very similar to being a woman of color as well, actually, and then not having to explain everything when you're in that space and people get you. And it's very similar, I guess, to lots of different diverse groups, actually, isn't it? Just, you know, even disabilities and all different diverse groups. You're in a group where people get you, they understand you, you can feel comfortable. You don't have to explain, because actually most of the day you're probably explaining, just like you had to explain, Berenice, to that person after that meditation. You know, we are having to explain, so this is a place where you don't have to.
And also in explaining it, it's making sure that you trust that the response is going to be empathetic as well. I think judging when to say something and when to not say something, and when just to walk away and cut your losses, I think is a massive thing to learn, a big thing to learn. Because sometimes you just know, I think particularly on social media, you kind of know when you're on a hiding to know where, and it actually sort of shows, I often think now it shows more about that person than it does about us and their lack of awareness and unwillingness probably just to change their opinion. And I think you just have to sort of learn to go, okay, yeah, this isn't working for me, and to walk away, that if we do find ourselves in those situations, but also within those groups as well, I did go back to the group, it was absolutely fine, and my feedback was taken on board, it was okay, and we had a learning process. So sometimes it's a good thing to say something, and sometimes it's a case of, okay, well, yeah, it's not going to quite work out for me in the way that it perhaps it should, and we just have to look after ourselves and do a little bit of self-care and walk away.
I think it's difficult. I think where we're all on, we're all sort of going for our childlessness. Some of us come to it early on. You haven't got the luxury of using your voice or going inside and meditating and having the confidence. I personally found that actually I lived a lot from the neck up, because I didn't want to use my voice. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to go, oh, hi, I'm childless, and this is what it means. I didn't want to do that educational piece because, you're kind of, I need to look after myself. So I'm just going to live from the neck up, just do what I've got to do, and I can switch all of this shit off, basically. So I find actually, you do learn to walk away, but actually the braver thing sometimes is using your voice, or is having that, going internally and thinking, well, actually, what do I need right now? Do I need to do that educational piece, or do I just need to go off and find my joy somewhere else? And I think having these groups, having these outlets where you don't have to do that, you can just be, is just so important for our community, because nobody else is going to do it for us. We've got to do it for us, haven't we?
There was an interesting thing that popped up the other day, actually, in this talk, and it was about handling stuff and calls in Zoom calls. I know we talked about this a few times on and off on the podcast, and it was about the takeaways that I gave to the group, and about how you just think, who needs to know this stuff? Does anyone really on this call need to know that someone is pregnant? Is that actually necessary, really? And if it's not, is there a better way of doing that? And if it's uncomfortable, and I know we talked about it as well, Sarah, in an episode about, well, do you just kind of walk away and just say, oh, my internet went down, or there was someone at the door, when you create yourself some space? And somebody else said, well, why don't you just say, actually, I'm extremely uncomfortable with this. I would like to walk away from this, because actually what you said is upsetting me. And my response was, but that actually takes a hell of a lot of courage to do that. If you're in a work environment that's not necessarily a safe space, and you've got absolutely no idea if anybody else on that call or that situation is same as you, or has any empathy with that whatsoever, because we're so used to having people going, what? Or that if you leave the call, they're not going to talk about you and go, what was wrong with her then? Why did Berenice think that was upsetting? What did I say? I don't know. Oh, well, maybe it's the bit that I mentioned that, there's children or something. So it's a really difficult thing to say. Really, really difficult. And it was just like, well, okay, placing again, it goes back to trust and safe spaces as well. It takes an awful lot of courage to do that. I think I said about our guests coming on here, and same to both of you as well, is that it takes courage to do that as well, to be here in this space.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying about creating safe spaces, which may lead you, if your confidence grows, it may lead you back into mixed spaces where you feel more comfortable. For me, the singing group, for instance, my success would be one that people pick up on some kind of mantra-like songs to take into their life and to wander around. So, I don't know. There's a song that we do that's called "Bloom Where You're Planted," which I love for our community. It actually was written by a friend of mine called Ros Thomas, who is a fabulous song leader in real life. And bloom where you're planted, flourish in that land. Hear how your heart sings, and shine just where you stand. Those are the words. And I love that for our community. Bloom where you're planted. That's what we're trying to do, isn't it? I've kind of lost my train of thought. It was about safe spaces. Yeah. So one, mantra songs. Come and learn some songs. Come and take those away with you. But two, come and learn them in a space where you're amongst your own. You feel safe. You're not going to be triggered by anything. Well, I hope you're not going to be triggered by anything that is said in the space. There are other triggers that might, but can you then, by doing that, grow in confidence enough to use your voice outside in spaces where everybody is? We're not divided into parents and non-parents and, people of colour and not people of colour and, whatever, young people and older people. We're not all divided up into small bits of life. Can your confidence grow? So for me, success would be people leaving my group, like come into it for a bit, but then go and join a real choir. Go and join a choir, maybe with a pal who's also childless, not by choice. Go and join something in your community, in your real life, your kind of local community. Where the triggers, where you've learned to deal with the triggers. Is that making sense?
It does. It's giving strength, isn't it?
Yeah. Releasing them into the wild.
Yes. Yeah. And it is. I think it's true. I mean, I think about all of our journeys and how we've all met, Sarah, Michael and I, and how we got together. It was through places where people were speaking. So actually it was via Fertility Fest, where people were saying something and up on stage doing something. And that almost is a kind of you think, oh, and certainly you think, oh, I'm with people, and you get a bit of a buzz of confidence in that, whether it's just like sat at a table with another friend, or whether it's just a little bit more than that, and it's more people, and it's just that strength, and you think, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'm not alone in this. There's actually other people, and there's always that space as well to come back to. So if you do go out into the wide world to another kind of mixed demographic, if you want, group, and whatever it is you choose to do, you do at least have somewhere else to go back to, your safe space. And to also, if there's triggers as well, that actually, even if they're kind of for you and they're your triggers, you actually have people that are around you that you can trust to say, actually, these are my triggers and I actually would like someone to talk to. And it's making more friends that way too. I think that is such a valuable thing to do, that building of friendship in a time like this as well, particularly, is really important.
Definitely. So where do you want to take it eventually, Claire? What do you think the future looks like? Because you sort of, it's like new, didn't you? So it's fairly new. Have you got a sort of vague notion?
Honestly, no. I don't know. What I know is that for me, about midday Sunday, I started to get excited about the fact that I'm doing that particular singing group that evening. And I do it on a Sunday night and a Monday morning so that it can be international, so that you could join it later on Monday in Australia, or you could join earlier on anyway, you know time zones. So I tried to do it, so it's Sunday night and Monday morning in the UK, but that suits a variety of time zones. And it's still, and will perhaps be for some time, experimental. I don't know quite where it's going. Part of me wants to say, so join us now while it's still, but I don't really feel like, I don't think unless it resonates, then maybe singing isn't for you, Anyway, but if it does, come and have a free taster, and see whether it's for you. I love the idea that maybe other groups will grow. My thing about singing has always been that it's not about me, it's about singing. so I'm certainly not the only person. We already have Helen Louise Jones as our healing voice, and she does wonderful chanting, singing, and there are probably lots of others burgeoning out there, lots of other singing groups. So I don't know. I don't know where it's going, Sarah. That's my answer. I don't know, but I love it. And the women who are in it now love it. And so that's a pretty good place to start, isn't it?
I want to see that. I want to see that online choir that you talked about.
I
think
think
that'd be
flash mobs as well.
fantastic.
Flash mob
I was
choirs.
actually going to say that.
Yeah, I know. I thought I knew. To be fair, actually, Claire, we had no idea about where the podcast was going either. So
Yeah,
we're still not entirely sure. These things happen.
yes, exactly.
I mean, I think you need to do a flash mob in Liverpool Street Station because lots of other people have done that. So why can't we?
It's true, Michael. It's an interesting thing. But for me, because I'm not really a performer, and for me, singing is about it's about just using your voice quietly yourself. I'm a member of the Natural Voice Network, which may be familiar to some people. We believe that singing is a birthright, and singing is not about having specialist skills like music reading. It's not about that. It's not about having specialist skills like an operatic voice. It's not, you don't have to train your voice. You've got one. So just kind of letting it out in song is slightly different, but not very, from letting it out in speech. And so the idea of kind of flash mobs and performances and immediately it brings, for me, that immediately goes, I go, no, not me. But I hope there will be other people who might.
There is, in fact, somebody who's done that, but one of our listeners, owned by a dog, who I adore her dog, and I won't name her because I don't think that's fair to do so without her permission, but she has, in fact, and I hope that perhaps maybe through the podcast we can perhaps connect people together, and that she might want to perhaps get in touch with us and just say what she's done and give us permission to share, because she has, in fact, there's a video of her on the train with her choir, and she's an incredibly talented musician, and they're singing on a train, and it was just this thing where she posted all the choir group and I follow her choir group online, and she posted, I'm like, oh, that's my friend, oh my gosh, she's on this train and she's singing, and oh, that's just so exciting. It was just really lovely to see her do that. Yeah, it was an amazing thing. So I think that probably there is like the secret kind of like I don't know, guerrilla flash mob thing going on within our community somewhere. I have to say that I'm with you, Claire. It's not my thing. I leave that to other people. I quite like to just, I like to be there when it happens, because I feel like I think I'd like to be one of the crowd going, oh my God, what's going on? Where's my phone? I need to, because actually that would be quite empowering, just to sit and watch someone else just do something. I'd be more happy with that.
Oh, I'd be there. Somebody else runs it.
Well, it's a date, Claire. We need to sort this out. I think someone needs to arrange this. They need to let the podcast know, and we will be there in some way or another. Wherever you are in the world, we'll try and get there and do that and witness it. But I think we need to do something quite powerful.
But one of the things that is developing for us is the potential for recording, so that at the moment online I use my voice overdubbed. I sing all the parts. And one of the things that we're trying to do is I'm trying to arrange is that the women who are in the group will send me recordings of their voice singing the songs that we're singing, so that there's more of a full sound with a variety of voices in it. Because that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's not about just my voice. And it's very frustrating on Zoom that is what you've got,
Yeah.
So
that's amazing.
That's one of the developments, but it's kind of, it's technological and it's slow and,
It's amazing. It's incredible. Bindi, what about you? What's your future with your meditation classes and the work you're doing?
Well, it's actually meditation classes for childless not by choice has actually reignited my own business again, because after my grief I was really like, I don't want to do this anymore. I was doing life coaching and I was like, I don't want to see people anymore, even even the meditation classes, because I was teaching physical classes and I just couldn't be in that space. So in a way, these classes have reignited my own passion for teaching meditation again. And I'm going to carry on. I'm definitely going to carry on because they nurture me as well. So I think as teachers, we teach what we need, and it's bringing it back to me. So I'm receiving the healing as I'm giving out to students. the healing and the classes. So at the moment I have grown, so I do have different time zones coming up, and I have a couple of people in Australia because I've got my 11 a.m. class in the UK now, which is evening in Australia. So they're going to come to that. So that's going to be on a Wednesday. So I'll have Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays as my kind of main time for meditations, and just grow them with as people want them, grow them. So that's my plan.
That's lovely to hear. It's so nice that it's giving something back to you as well, because they are just very lovely classes and very lovely space as well. And each week we learn something new. I think that's what's been so lovely with the meditation, is that every week we're kind of growing and doing something different. So there's a nice process and things that you can kind of back on. As often I've stood in some situations recently and thought, okay, ball of light is quite a big thing in what you're teaching, isn't it? And it's something you can take away with you and keep with you all the time, and the shield around you as well. And it's a very lovely thing to have, so it's much appreciated. There's a lovely sense of grace to what you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Berenice. And I do find that the ball of light it's actually especially important for us as well with the childless not by choice, because I do think it just adds an invisible layer that we can feel as we go out into the world. So it's really nice, because I've always taught the ball of light with all of my classes all these years, but it seems to be especially valuable, let's say, for our community. So it's really nice. Thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. It's very lovely, and I'm so pleased that you've got the different time zones as well, because it's something that everyone can get advantage from, and it gives people that flexibility to join in when they feel like it's best for them as well. Does this time work for me? Some people I know prefer to meditate first thing in the morning, and sometimes it's nicer in the evenings. They've got that variety. I think if you're in the UK, then you've got lots of different times that you can choose from that actually work for you. It's that nice sort of feel as well that suits into your day. So that's really good. Thank you so very much for joining us.
How can people contact you, Bindi?
Oh yeah, so my website is bindishah.com. So it's Bindi, BINDISHAH.com, and it's under meditations. So that's the best. I am on Instagram, Letters to My Soul.
And what about you, Claire? If people are interested in what you're doing, how can they contact you?
So they would want to look up growing singing, childless, and whole. If they find growing singing in Kendal, then there's a page specifically. So there's a lot more explanation of what we do, and then they can just sign up for a free taster and come and see if it's your thing. It might not be.
And that's all we have to leave Bindi and Clare. Now, we would love to hear your opinions on the podcast, and you may have a suggestion on how we can improve it. We would love to hear from you. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and the links can be found in our website, www.thefullstoppod.com, where you can also register for our newsletter so you can keep up to date with what we've been up to. Now, we would also appreciate it if you could rate us on the platform you are using to listen to the podcast, because the more ratings we get, the wider our spread and the more of our community we can reach. Now, we'll put all of Bindi and Clare's contact details in the show notes. And if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast or have a burning issue that you think our community should be aware of, then please go to the website where you can find a form to fill in and give some details. Don't forget, we love hearing from our audience, so please drop us a line at any time. And as always, it's important for us to let you know you are not alone.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that much more than I thought I might. And I am so grateful to the three of you for doing what you do. It's just really important, isn't it, that our voices are kind of put out there in a variety of forms. Every episode is so different, one from another. And
we roll with it. We don't quite know what we're going to do we?
No, well, I like the fact they're different. This one's been really gentle, actually. I've really enjoyed this one. Just listening to you both, it's fascinating.